have a hot take.
A student needs to be like the focal point.
I'm gonna get threats from faculty members.
Oh, was that the podcast? Did you start the podcast?
Exactly. We were flying back to DC from Philly. We were in Vermont before that first shoot, and we hadn't eaten any dinner. Our flight was in like an hour or something like that. So we stopped by this airport restaurant and bar, had a couple drinks, and then our flight was delayed. So we decided we'd use the time productively and try to brainstorm the name for a new Enrollify podcast.
What was the podcast ended up?
That's a good question. It was
that was Jeremy
Jeremy Cheers' podcast. It was Mission Admissions. Yeah.
Mission Admissions.
And it was this fun, it was this super fun dialogue.
You can tell we were at dinner getting drinks when we
But it was a fun experiment because Dan, you're behind the scenes most of the time. Dan's our video guy, our video aficionado, as some might say. And Shane, you're relatively new to the Enrollify team as well. But it was a cool riffing, bonding moment. And I don't know, I thought the name ended up being at least half decent when all said and done.
I think we started silly, and it was more of we need to be entertained. We're in a Philadelphia airport with nothing to do, time to kill. We're at the end of a trip, we're exhausted. Then it started out with some horrible names. We won't point fingers at who was making them.
You need to have horrible names to get
that's
to
what I said while we were there.
It
It really does, and it allows everyone else to feel more comfortable. And then after a million silly
That's
ideas.
what my role is.
To help people feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
Brainstorm facilitator.
You just present the shitty ideas so that the rest of us can look smart.
Right.
Yeah.
It's an important role, Dan. It's an important role, Dan. But anyways, that was
that's on record now.
That was the impetus for what Enrollify's newest podcast is going to be called, which this will be actually our first video first show. So that's also a big deal since we got the video guy around.
Expect nothing less.
Nothing less. And so we're calling this podcast the Brewstorm. And what we're going to do is each podcast we're going to brainstorm either an idea, maybe a couple ideas, depending on where we want to take this. That is at least somewhat, if not mostly, related to the work that higher education marketers have to do with coming up with new campaign ideas, coming up with new ideas for student recruitment, coming up with new fundraising campaigns, whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. So today, what are we going to brainstorm, Shane? What are we going to flesh out?
I think because podcasts are so trendy, as we were just talking about, thinking through what would a good enrollment marketing podcast for a school look like to try and recruit prospective students and using it as a recruitment tool, and what could they talk about that's different from the stuff you'll read on their website, different from you come to an event, you ask questions, and you get the very basic, here's who we are. What would actually be helpful, do you think, for people today that launch this podcast? It's a series. You also realize, you're not necessarily building up this huge foundation where people are going to tune in to multiple, you might only get one shot. So each one has to be jam-packed with info and cool stuff, but they can't also all be the same.
Yeah.
So what could that look like, and how could that kind of be done well, and who needs to be brought in to make sure that's a success and interesting?
So it's a marketing team that is trying to create content, a podcast specifically, that will be interesting to prospective students, but also accurately reflect the culture of the school.
Yeah.
So it's got to be it's got to be entertaining. It's got to be interesting. It's got to be reflective of the culture of the school.
Right.
And we're starting from scratch. So we don't have a name.
Right.
We don't have a mission. We don't even totally know what the target audience is beyond prospective student.
Yeah. Or who does the podcast.
Or who's
responsible for it.
All right. So where do we start? What's the first one?
I have an idea.
Okay.
Yeah. I think this whole idea about trying to come up with a good podcast jam-packed with reasons why people should go to a university is a terrible idea.
Ooh.
Because I don't think people want to be sold to when they're on a podcast. You just want entertainment. I feel like it'd be cool to just select different stories from throughout campus or the university. Maybe that's interviewing notable students who've done something cool, what's your research that you've done, and maybe or you're just someone from you're the president of a fraternity or something, and you I don't know, have something, I don't know, interesting people throughout campus and whatnot, where you're just getting to know the campus and just like interviewing them on like stories about what they've done.
Yeah. That's what, when I was originally thinking about this podcast, actually, I was thinking there's nothing like an admissions coordinator, director of admissions, even I think like a CMO, a marketing person, like prospective students gonna hear it and be like, you're just like blowing smoke.
Yeah.
Versus either one, you have like a facilitator of conversation who goes and finds the people you're talking about, of like, today we're gonna do a profile on, somebody on the baseball team, and they're gonna talk about like what it's like playing a sport and being enrolled at X university, and give you maybe a little bit more like unfiltered, here's what it's like, or like you admissions person don't get to like filter, necessarily what they're saying. Obviously pick your people wisely, but I think what's hard is you have to build trust with that person immediately, so it has to feel authentic and real. Otherwise, the people listening are gonna be like, you're just trying to like if that guy's like, it's great, we have study hall and I love it because it helps me get good grades. It's like no one's gonna believe that. And so how do you kind of mix the student story without trying to like guide the student story on your own? I think would be hard, but I think is what you might have to do in order to like truly get buy-in.
You also, I feel like you have to start with not just the person that wants to be like a podcast host, but like who is actually like a charismatic character. Like you need to find that individual to kind of carry the content. And I feel like, I don't know, like we've talked about this before on other Enrollify podcasts about building like a good like TikTok team and doing the work of trying to figure out who at your university or school already has like a sizable TikTok following. What are they doing? And like, are they doing it well? Like, well being defined as, are people actually like watching their stuff and engaging with that content? And then I think it's actually more about like maybe building content around key individuals, assuming that they espouse at least some of your values as an institution, even if it's not, all of your values, and then finding that individual and building content around them. Because if they like what they're talking about and they're good at talking, it's going to be interesting, at least to some prospective students.
Yeah, almost like your new version of a student ambassador. But then I do think leveraging that person to then go chat with other students. Yeah. Because I think what's cool, and I think what a lot of cooler companies and agencies are now doing is like, all right, how do we hyper personalize and like the see yourself at this type of school? Like, how do we best do that? And that's why I think going back to the example of like the baseball person or like somebody in a certain fraternity, sorority, or member of a, X club, whatever it might be, like what's cool about that specific thing and getting that person's take on it. I think it goes much further than just some popular person at your university who, who knows what their audience is like. Maybe their audience isn't necessarily even made up of prospective types of students, and therefore like, that's fine, but I don't know that it's going to get you what you're looking for. But as you're saying, if they're charismatic and they're super like, they kind of know how to be on camera, which I think is a hard thing. But if they can pull in the right people, and then you're almost creating a podcast of like, this is kind of just for these types of people. Yeah. But you just kind of go like, what are our biggest groups that we kind of want to continue to build on campus? Let's kind of start there and just work our way backwards. Could be a great way to start at least tapping into that market with something a little bit more personalized than just like, here's why you should come to our school, because everybody has that and they're all the same.
What do you think about, like I'm thinking about like entertaining, and I think the problem with developing one temptation when developing a podcast is like, you're trying to come up with something relatively like niche for a niche audience. And like the best podcasts, like they understand their audience, they're a thought leader, the host is like a thought leader in this space, and where they're interviewing thought leaders in space. Like they're generally pretty focused. But I think one of the unique challenges of a higher ed marketer or someone working in admissions that would be producing a show like this is like, your prospective student pool is massive. It's a very diverse prospective student pool. So here's a question. How many different, does what people find entertaining, does it change dramatically depending on who you are? Doesn't mean you love the content or would watch a documentary on Kanye West if you have no interest in him, but when you think about what people find cool or entertaining, is it is it widely varying from like a raw entertainment standpoint, or not so much? And I guess maybe a better way of thinking about this is like, is the mechanics of putting something out to solicit like a specific response, is that pretty varied or not so much? What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know, because there are things, I've watched documentaries on people that I'm like, I don't know anything about you, but you're somebody that like I should know.
Yeah.
Or that is famous in a space that I don't particularly care about. And then watching it, well, that's just like a crazy cool person. Like, and there's a mutual appreciation, I think, amongst groups that maybe aren't into Kanye West or, a variety of other people, but you can respect how they came up and all the work that they did. And it's cool and interesting. And so, I wonder if it's more just the tempo or the cadence at which you personalize your podcast of like, a general, too specific, a general, like too specific, a general, and like, what is the right, and maybe that's something you just need to test with your audience. And obviously it depends on your school size. Like if you're a massive institution, maybe you need to go more general because you have 500 specific audiences and it might not be worth it. But if you're a really small school in a rural area and you're like, we know exactly who comes to this school and you can speak right to them, that's kind of how you run it. But
I'm thinking about, we just put out this master course trailer for Enrollify's first ever master course on how to market a university with Terry Flannery. And
shameless plug.
And the trailer, like I sent that around to, like I posted on my personal Facebook and like my Instagram and whatnot. And I got people who know nothing about higher education, let alone higher education marketing, that like went out of their way to text me or like DM me, and they were like, dude, that was like so sick. And I was like, made it myself.
Yeah.
Just kidding. It was all him, guys. But like I guess what I'm getting at is that was entertaining, right? And people resonated with that, even though they didn't understand like the subject or necessarily even like what the course was about.
Sure.
So I'm wondering like if we can come to terms, if we can agree that like there is a formula, there is a framework, there are like mechanics that make something just interesting, regardless of what the content topic is. If we can agree on that, then I think that then I think you can actually make a show around an individual that is charismatic, that is like, even if that individual is not like a thought leader, so to speak, or isn't even well-versed in like the breadth and depth of your programs. Sure. And I guess what I'm getting at is that person could then like, let's just say there's a journalism major, a communications person, she's got like 1 million TikTok followers, right? Like she's a TikTok influencer.
Yeah.
She's at your school, she loves the school, she wears your swag a lot. Is there a way where you like design a podcast and you have her go and like do a special series on like engineering programs, and she's like interviewing these engineering students who might, stereotypically anyways, be a little bit more like shy to like be on a podcast, but could her personality and her character carry that because she knows something about what it takes to create entertaining content, regardless of how much she knows or doesn't know about engineering? Does that make sense? Like, what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, that's where I feel like you don't need to know anything really. You need to be entertaining. Like any good podcast host or interviewer is typically a curious person who's good at talking and who seems like they have high interest in everything.
Yeah.
And so they're able to like ask those next questions and things. But I think going back to like the Terry Flannery example, like amazing video, these people that are reaching out to you, they're not really in the space. Great, love the video, but they're not going to do anything, right? And it's thinking about the same thing in like the recruitment process. Awesome video. I have no interest in going across the country to that school. Right, and you might get some trickle in, and so maybe it'll be worth it. But yeah, really thinking maybe how you leverage that person as your key entertainer and your host. But they really just go out and they find other people that are doing X, Y, and Z thing that like that's what will attract students. But they're serving as hosts. They're not serving as the reason why people are necessarily coming to the university. It's because they heard Billy talk about engineering and they were like, that sounds awesome. Like he's doing super cool stuff as a student and has all these cool experiences and talks about other things beyond just, I think too, there's a tendency to overhype the academics when it's like, I think,
yeah.
What's the community like? Is there like, where I went to school, we were placed in dorms on floors with people of like majors. And the point was like, if you don't know people, it's easier to kind of like, hey, what's up? I saw you in one of my classes. And like, they're trying to build community. And I'm wondering if people talking more about that, like, and your host who's an entertainer will draw that out of people.
Yeah.
Like that could be a huge win for people that I think might convince them if they're on the fence about 3-4 colleges and they feel like I'm going to be way more comfortable here. What do you think? You're very shy.
Yeah. Okay. Also, like Dan, like, what do you think about like? Would you listen? Like, if you were looking at a school, right? Like, would you listen to like a podcast that they produce?
I don't know. I was thinking about like what are the things that make me listen to a podcast, and first I was thinking about like, well, I feel like generally I gravitate towards produced podcasts versus conversational podcasts, which is bad for this show. For my but
wait, that just means like highly edited shows.
Yeah. I mean, basically.
Yeah.
It's called Netflix, Dan.
Yeah. No, but then I think like the more I was thinking about it, I think it comes down to like usually I think the reason why I like the produced show is because they just really boil down what the show is about to either like teaching you something or like telling a really interesting story. And I feel like as long as you can, I think that can be achieved via conversational podcasts. So if through this, podcast where, you're interviewing different students from around campus, as long as you're able to like, I feel like it would probably make the most sense to just tell like a compelling story about like how, did you go about finding this university and like, maybe there was a really like long process about like you were passionate about the like program, but then you had to go through a process of like, I got something in my eye.
Just get so passionate about this.
I know, right?
Yeah, you're crying.
What was I saying?
Something that whether it's a program that you're compelled by or like an experience or.
And then maybe you have to like, go through a lot of, jump through a lot of hoops to get financial aid, and then you finally get here and you make a lot of. I don't know, like that's probably a stupid story to tell, but
no.
I think the storytelling aspect is probably like what you're gonna get the most out of people, and if there's a lot of intrigue on how like they got there or whatever.
Going back to jumping through hoops though, how much do you think? I think this is why people again wouldn't trust one produced by the school and people that work at the school. Like there's no negatives. It's all like, here's a list of a million reasons we're great. And it's like, cool, nobody's that great. What are you guys not good at? What's a problem? What do current students complain about?
Yeah.
Like I would love if somebody put together, like get that, charismatic person.
Yeah.
And you can put a twist on it so it's not just like, let's all shit on this school.
Like
come up with a list of stuff that like, here's some challenges the school has. Or like, hey, when you're a freshman, your dorm's gonna suck.
Yeah.
Like it's not great,
Yeah.
but once you're a sophomore, they're awesome, right? And it's like, okay, bad thing, but it's only a year. You'll be fine. You're there for 4. And I think that's one of the things that schools struggle with is like, how do you show the negative things, then end with a positive, and to build a little bit of that trust with prospective students.
If you have someone who's good enough at like making people comfortable, I feel like the negative will come out in whatever you're talking about because not everything about everything is perfect. So like there will be the the shortcomings of the school or like the challenges you like encounter and whatever it is. But like I think as long as it comes down to like a really authentic and genuine story, that's going to be what people are able to connect with, and they'll be happy to look past
negatives
whatever negatives were brought up in that story because it's an authentic story.
Right.
And you want to then become part of that. You're like, wow, look at that like great story that I just heard that like happened at that school, and like now I'm more compelled to go to that school.
Yeah. I also think too, like picking on the financial aid example, because I think that's probably the easiest, but if your financial aid for whatever reason is a real challenge, or you kind of like oversell it and do these things, it's like you're setting up that student. Let's say that even the whole point of saying that is to get students.
Yeah.
You get a student that then can't do those things, and then they have to like drop out or transfer or do something. And it's like you failed that student, but you got their like their application dollars and 6 credits worth of tuition. Like I feel like that's a morally wrong thing to do, and I feel like that's something that I'm sure it's hard to figure out like what's worth saying and exposing, and maybe what I think, people, they know the inner workings of their institution and what the problems are internally. Like I've yet to see a school that has been super transparent of like, here's some of the challenges you're going to hit, but also here's a list of ways to like overcome those challenges. Or, hey, if you're this type of person, you're not going to be a good fit for this institution. Like, we're being honest with you because we're trying to set you up for success. We don't actually care if you come here or not. A school that does that, I think that would be awesome.
That's brilliant. I mean, and I think what's so cool about that is like, those things like exist. Like they are there.
Oh, yeah.
We're just like not like schools just like aren't honest with them a lot of the time.
Right.
And it's like I think about like a campus tour, and it's like you always bring folks to like the quad or like the most beautiful like picturesque place of campus is like where you start your tour, like end your campus tour.
Yeah.
And then like you like try to like steer them clear through like the construction and like the crappy looking building from like the 50s that hasn't been renovated.
We promise it's gonna look great in 2 years.
Yeah. Renovations are starting. They won't be done until you graduate. But like they'll get done one day. But like to your point, it's like what does it look like to just be ridiculously transparent about like here's where we're great, here's where we're not great. Here are the kinds of students that excel here. Here are the kinds of students that really don't. I think it's gonna be really hard for higher ed, but I think like as schools have to get more targeted with their positioning, it's a foregone conclusion that'll happen.
I think what you will see with that though, that just will take some adjustment, and we're in such a massive adjustment period now anyway, is okay, leads might go down. Bummer. But nobody actually should care about the number of leads they get. Like, what if you got 100 leads? They all turned into applicants and they all turned into enrolled students. Would you care
goal
that you
was
got 100 leads? Oh, you didn't get your 1,000? Who cares? The goal was to get 100 enrolled students. You got those 100. Why do you care how big the funnel was at the top to get those? And so, if you can be that brutally honest, you're gonna deter those leads that aren't gonna matriculate through anyway. And so like you're getting the quality people, and you can spend more, your admissions coordinators and counselors can spend more time chatting with those people, doing direct follow-up, and not having to think like, I can't call 1,000 people this week, right? But you could call 100 if you really had to, and that was your full-time job. And so I think that's one thing that, it's more about, I think, pleasing higher-ups with certain numbers, that like all those numbers boil down to a set of numbers that are the most important. How do we more think about just like getting those sets of numbers and what's gonna best do that, rather than the like, how do we need more leads, spend more money on Facebook. And it's like, well, that'll get you the leads, but
I feel like losing leads would probably be the worst case scenario, because if anything, I feel like, since no one's doing it and calling out their weaknesses, I feel like it will just attract more. I mean, it's even kind of like, what was it? We were in Dallas a couple weeks ago, and we were at that restaurant. I don't know what it was called, but Shane, our server came up and said, by the way, like, these are the things you should get. And then,
she was great.
By the way, like, these dumplings or whatever, like, don't get those, and don't get these. And then, like, there was like one or two things she was like people don't like these. Like, it's kind of hit or miss. And as soon as she left, you were like, my like respect for her is like tenfold, because she's obviously telling me the actual information, not sugarcoating it just for their restaurant's like benefit.
Right. And she's also not one of those like, oh, very conveniently, the most expensive wine whatever are the best. She was giving us things where it was like, these are the best things. They were scattered. And they were also amazing, but it was crazy when it was like, I feel much more comfortable. And we go to a restaurant every time, and Zach always asks, what's good here? And when you get the waiter that's like, I mean, everything's good. And it's like, great, so nothing's good. Like, thanks. And then when somebody else is like, this thing's really good, this is fine, I don't really like it. And it's food, so it's personal preference.
Of course.
So like, why don't people feel comfortable doing that? Same thing with schools. Like, schools are preference, big schools, small schools, like, it's all preference. Why not just say these things and then let people make their own decision? Rather than like, okay, great, I go to a restaurant, you tell me the $900 steak is amazing. I don't get the $900 steak because I don't have $900. I get the other one. And it's like, okay, that sucked. That's their best thing. I'm not coming back here ever again. Versus if I have something I really like, if we go to Dallas again, I'd want to go just to see that lady again, because she was hilarious and awesome.
But also what was so cool about that story is like, I think all three of us ended up changing what we were going to get based off of what she said. Which I think is also just like, this is like really interesting analogy. It's like, because she was so brutally honest, we did change our opinion.
Yeah.
We still had we were still at the restaurant. We had like an incredible meal, and like thank God we did change it. But like, I think all three of us got something completely different than we were planning to because of how she like courted us, which was super, super cool.
Yeah.
All right, so bringing this in, here's an idea. All right, what if the podcast was something like the middle of the road? We can critique the name in a second, okay? just work with me here. So the middle of the road, and it is hosted by a junior, like a first semester junior. Okay, so they're a little bit more than halfway through their like college career. And what the show is it's in-depth stories of different students, like from different demographic backgrounds, different majors, different programs, an athlete, right? Like, etc. Out of state, in state, all the different personas. And it's like an in-depth profile on, hey, I want to talk to you. These are all people that are either in their second semester sophomore year or first semester junior year. So like they're in the middle of the road. They're not brand new to the institution, so they've had time to get into it, but they're also not like a tired senior that's checked out and just like wants to like get on. Even if they had a great experience, they just want to get on with their life. And it's profiles of like, hey, talk to me about your college search process. What was so difficult? Like when you came to campus here, what were the 3 things that like turned you off? Or like what were the 3 things that you were that were, you know, negative hits, if you will, towards the school? And so you get some of that like raw, like these are the things that aren't great. But then you also get insight into how they approach their college search. But then they also obviously chose the school because they're there, right? So then you can unpack, okay, like, you know, why did you ultimately choose the school? And then you're a couple years in now. How did the school do? Like, how did we do at like, you know, validating our unique value proposition that we promised you on your campus tour? Rough framework of a show. What do you guys think about that? React.
Solid. Yeah.
The middle of the road.
Okay, we can critique the name in a second. What do you first think about? Like, first critique like the concept, and then we'll come up with like names.
No, I like the concept, but I also think it is important to understand the like full journey of the 4 years. Like you are making a massive commitment. So while hearing from the sophomores and juniors is great because like they've had time to form an opinion, but they haven't gotten sick of it yet, or just like they're not ready to be just done with college, which I think happens for anybody anywhere. Like, can't wait to have a job, start making money. Like, been in college for 4 years. I can't work in summers because I'm also taking classes and I'm, you know, broke. But I do think it would be cool to have like almost a timeline of different people, of like freshmen in, you know, your communications program all the way through to senior year, but it's for different people representing those things, and they're kind of giving their like insights and input based on their, you know, major or their college or whatever. And as a freshman, as a sophomore, as a junior, and like also tracking kind of like what does that mean for people as they move through. Like for the business program, for example, it's like my senior year, I'm taking classes that like I kind of wrapped everything up. After my junior year, I'm like BSing this year just to like
taking like cooking
get by. It's like I've kind of got my core classes, whatever. And they're taking nonsense. I think would be cool. I do like the idea of the middle of the, I think the most value will come from the sophomores and juniors. But I think, again, the transparency factor of like hearing what the freshman has to say, and like those might be ones that the school's kind of like, ooh, love that those went out. But like, hey, that's
what you need. I feel like that would be really good for getting like a general sense of like, what is this, you know, university like generally like, you know, obviously like middle of the road. I think what would be cool is to kind of combine that, like what could be a completely different podcast or like maybe potentially meld together with this is like, what if you just had a journalism student who was like particularly talented at journalism in a way that wouldn't embarrass the school. No freshman journalism. Anyway, who's just searching for like, what is the coolest story at the moment that campus has to, like the students on campus have to tell? Like maybe that's like, you know, there's a really cool production going on and whatever, or like, you know, they're doing cool research, or just like, I don't know, maybe someone just got a really prestigious award and like let's go find out what that story is. I mean, basically bringing like what just maybe a trying to spice up like a school newspaper almost would be. But just trying to seek out, rather than just trying to see like, oh, like you're a student who's got a unique perspective. Let's hear your perspective. Like, let's find out the most exciting thing that's happening on campus right now, and like try to see what's going on there.
Yeah. I think schools try and do that.
Yeah.
I think they're not good at it. Like,
that's true.
Or it's
because like the marketing team is like controlling the narrative. Typically, it's like, hey, we want the marketing team or the admissions team, whoever it is like they're dictating what the most interesting thing on campus is.
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying, which I like, is that it's almost like the student decides.
Yeah.
So this person would, like, the host would need to be well versed enough. Like they need to be like a big person, like persona on campus. They'd have to like be well aware of like everything happening in student life in order to like make that judgment call. But it's almost like you let the student decide what is the most interesting thing happening on campus right now, and they go and like cover that thing.
Right.
Yeah. Or even go around and ask students, like interview 25 students.
Yeah.
What's the coolest thing happening on campus this week?
Yeah.
And just see what they say.
Ooh,
like
that's good.
that would be also that would be
Maybe
hilarious.
that's just like a party or something.
Right.
Because
I think it'll show what students actually care about too. It won't be like, oh, this faculty member got an award.
Yeah.
If you're an undergrad in particular, I can't really imagine you give a shit. Like,
unless you're at like a top 10 school or something like that, you might give a shit.
And it's
about
also
that,
like, what does that mean?
What does that mean for me?
Yay for you.
Yeah.
I
like that a lot.
Whatever, but like interviewing people and then being like, I think you'll get a lot of like, oh, cool sports stuff, or like, oh, I think there are a lot of schools, particularly maybe like the R1 schools, where it's like, oh, there's this massive, thing happening. These people are going to be, exposed nationally for some of the stuff they're doing, like, and those are students, and that's cool. But it would be hilarious. I bet you'd get you get everything. You'd get people saying nonsense of like, we're gonna have chicken tenders in the cafeteria this week for the first time, versus the people that are like really in tune with campus that have different opinions. But I think that would be both entertaining and interesting.
Yeah, that's good. I think that we have several ideas here. So if we were to try to like package this a little bit more like neatly. So the way that I'm hearing this is we've got kind of two core ideas. Idea number one is this like middle of the road-ish idea where you're a little bit more like focused, like student profiles, but again, the student is the host and they're talking to other second semester sophomores, first semester juniors about like, all right, talk to us about what you thought this experience at the school would be like. How did we do with that? Like, how did we like measure up there? And again, that's a diverse pool of stories. Show number two, or like category number two, is a little bit more like, all right, empower a student to go find the most interesting story happening on campus this week and allow them to cover that and turn that into content that can be used or promoted on a show that prospective students could find and discover and engage with. Are those kind of like the two buckets that we're talking about? All right. So let's talk about like names. Like if we were gonna name these two different shows, the Middle of the Road is the first name that I come up with, which is kind of shitty.
Terrible name, as Zach.
Terrible name.
I think Middle of the Road is a bad name because it makes it sound boring and Middle of the Road.
Okay, excuse me.
But I was wondering if maybe like my first idea was like inside blank university, but I don't like that one because I feel like it's too branded, and I feel like it's got to be like something.
Inside
and then
higher
maybe like the smaller, like the subtitle is like a show about learning about the students of blank university.
Yeah.
But maybe it's something like, I feel like it has to be generic so that it's not like too salesy and more of just like here's a raw look at just like meeting students.
But I think what some schools do well is they use their like mascot in titles like that, where it's not overtly like, think about, I went to a high school and our mascot was the Wildcats, and like there are 75 Wildcats colleges that I can think of. Like you could use Wildcats in a cool way, or like
Wildcats Unfiltered.
Yeah,
I mean something like that, like where it's like it's going to be, it immediately implies that this is like raw, and it could have like some negative connotation to it for sure.
Yeah.
But it could also just be like you know, it at least communicates or it like evokes like transparency.
Yeah. But I think, it would have to be, it should be specific to your school to some degree.
Sure.
Otherwise, it's just like, well, I think the most boring podcast names are the ones that's like anybody could use that. Like,
Yeah, that's true.
not that the idea was the worst idea, but like middle of the road could be used
No,
for
it's okay. His is
literally
worse.
anything.
Yeah.
It wasn't as bad as some of yours. Philadelphia, but
What was your first one last night? It was like, oh gosh.
Stupid. Admissions
Wait,
101 is bad.
at the Philly airport one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was like,
Wait, what were we trying to come
we were
up
coming up with the name of Jeremy Tiers' podcast,
Yeah.
Admissions.
which is supposed to be a podcast
It's-
about interviewing.
More like leadership focused for admissions people, but typically
Okay, yeah.
maybe a little more earlier on in
It's
their
like
career.
it's like interviewing people inside and outside of higher ed about like leadership and team empowerment and like how this can translate into like empowering your admissions team to operate better. That's kind of like the ethos of the show. It might have been just like admissions 101 or no.
Yeah.
No.
There was
Mine was
a
creative.
terrible-
No, you had
It was
another
creative,
stupid one. You
but it
tried
was
to make
horrible.
you tried to make a play on emissions with an E.
Oh,
Admissions.
Yeah.
Admissions.
In hindsight, that's not
Admissions,
actually the
admissions.
worst, but
I think that was pretty solid. Just.
No. All right, but okay. So bringing it back to
Oh no! It was just admissions. It was not admissions.
That's right.
Emissions. It was spelled the same way, which is like doesn't work because you can only. Well, you just.
we've
have
already
to
hammered
explain-
home the point that it was bad. I think we can
so
Well, but emissions like justifies it and almost makes it a good idea.
no.
Yeah, which means it wasn't yours.
Yeah.
Listen, it's always about starting the
brainstorm?
Yeah, that is true.
The brewstorm. Yeah, it's not as no.
It's the hardest part, man. It's the hardest part. All right, so I like this idea. Another idea I had, which maybe is like a derivative of this, but like, and maybe this is just because like I studied marketing and I love like I love like I'm a sucker for like a good entrepreneur, and so maybe this is like a bias coming out, which probably is, but I think it'd be really interesting. And actually, I take that back. It's not even a bias. Data is showing that more and more prospective students are entrepreneurial or desire to be entrepreneurs. People want to be creators. Like people want to work for themselves in some capacity. And so what if there was like a show that unpacked like what was being built at this school? Almost like a how I built this, but like how we're building this. And it's almost like this like deep sort of like unpacking of like what are the different, because there are many schools that are like built like incubating businesses at those schools, but even it could extend beyond just business, like research, like what we're trying to, we have an we have R1 status. These are like the 3 things that we're trying to do and study right now. Mm-hmm. And here's how they would change the world if we can figure it out. Like something like that.
Yeah.
Is that like, does a 17-year-old, is it just too like sophisticated and they won't listen to shit
I think
like that?
that's great.
I feel like that's a missed opportunity in the space that a school should do.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's the kind of that track of podcasts is all I've listened to like my entire life, like my podcast listening. I want to hear what
Dan's sold. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm a very big podcast listener, and I feel like again that is the other, like it's storytelling or like teaching you something.
Yeah,
and if you're teaching someone something that is like gonna change the world, like I don't care who you are, you're probably interested in like changing the world, and like hearing what new and what's gonna make that happen.
And what's kind of cool about something like this is like it's very much depending on how it's positioned, but it's like this is like an active thing happening, and there could almost be like an invitation at the end of each episode that's like, we're building this like chain. If you are interested in creating, the next Tesla, like join us, or whatever it is. Like there could be a soft
We'll
call.
take that audio soundbite right there and put that at the end there.
But I think what could be hard about that style is like, okay, by the time I enroll, like, is that going to be done? Like,
But I don't think it matters.
are people going to get too attached to the idea?
No, but it doesn't matter.
I don't know. I think they might. I could see myself
I think
hearing
doing
a cool idea and be like, "That's awesome."
Yeah,
but then
I want to
like,
go build. I want to go.
Oh, but they're doing it. Like they're gonna.
Yeah.
By the time I get, like, they're not gonna.
And like you write in, you're like, I want to work on this project. And they're like, sorry,
Yeah,
we have like a
exactly.
200-person wait list.
Right.
Yeah.
Doing a hard cheesy sell, a hard sell at the end like that, I feel like is not what you want the like podcast to be. I think
Sure,
it's about like, So
I mean,
I think
my only
maybe
point
more-
was some sort of invitation that evokes like you can do shit like this here. Like we've made it possible.
You need a track record. So like,
Yeah.
I think you do need. I think that's cool, but I think you need a like. Here's how this kind of continues on.
Yeah.
Which is going to be vague because you don't know necessarily the next thing you're working on. But thinking about some of the schools, particularly some of the maybe more niche programs in engineering or cyber physical systems, for example, right?
Yeah.
It's like very complex, but it's the infrastructure for how your Amazon Echo works or whatever. Like we've done that. Before that was this cool thing that you've heard of. And then this, and it was like, it kind of dates back 10 years.
Yeah.
Of like, it's almost the evolution of technology in this field or like whatever it is for a variety of programs. Like, here's the evolution. We've worked on these things. Like whatever the next thing is, we're going to be working on that.
Yeah.
And like, we have been successful in all these before. There's no reason to think we're not going to be again.
I think that should be the job of whoever's hosting the show to weave that into the story when they're telling that. Because I think it's like, if you tell like a great story about something cool your university's, like people are gonna be like, yes, that is what I like. And then if you're like at the end you're like, we've all done all this other stuff, or like, just so you know, like so much more is coming and we're working on so much other stuff, like become a part of it. Like they were already there once you told them the really cool story. I think you just have to let that be implied. And I don't think you should even try to touch that, or else as soon as you get close to being salesy, I think that's when people will be like, this is a salesy podcast. I mean, like,
but I think that's in the weeds of it, of like, but if somebody were to say, some medical schools, like, oh, we're working on a solve for COVID, right? And it's like, okay, that will not last 2 more years. So by the time you get here, all right, then what are you guys doing? Like,
but again, I don't know that like, I hear what you're saying, and I think it's a very valid point. I think that like your average person is going to understand that like, okay, by the time, if they're 2 years out from school, they're probably not going to get to work on that project, but it says more about like,
but that
your
person
brand.
could be 16. Like if it's undergrad, and that person's 16 years old, 2 years out from college. But I don't know that they're going to be thinking through like, oh yeah, they worked on that. That'll be done by the time I'm there. But
I don't think it matters. I think you, just by sharing the story, it speaks more about like your brand than like, I don't think you have to worry about like misleading people, Like,
Sure.
But
I think the track record of, it's even cool. Like think about, was it one of the Apple commercials forever ago when they showed the evolution of the Mac computer over time? And it was like, that was sick. That was so cool. And I know you're an Apple fanboy. So I'm like, all right, take that.
Don't need to say it that way. Fanboy.
But like, take that and imagine that's true for a video program. And you're like, okay, these people worked on, these types of projects over time. They were the first to do this, that, and the other, or like whatever. Like,
they produced
wouldn't that be
Netflix's
cooler
first
than somebody that's
series.
just like, oh, we're doing this one cool thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're kind of the new kid on the block that's doing this cool thing versus the people that have established themselves and are doing all this cool stuff.
But I think that just has to be weaved into the story.
I wasn't saying it's like the Star Wars credits where it's like, here's all the stuff we've done and this is laundry list.
That's exactly what's suggested.
Oh, God. Well, that's good. So we've got like, I'd say 3 pretty solid ideas.
Yeah.
Middle of the road. Just kidding. But no, that like people could like take and run with. And I do think that there's like I wonder why. I mean, I'm sure that there are podcasts that people are doing that are like akin to these things. But I feel like the reason why not enough of it has taken off is like, and again, this is super hard, but like I think what we're all in agreement on at least is like, a student needs to be like the focal point, like the host, like the personality of the show. Like that needs to, again, if your market is trying to attract prospective students, do that. Yeah. Two, I think that like, and that's hard. It's hard to find like the right person that like can do something like this. But at the same time, like, I mean, you've got all these students like studying journalism and communications and marketing. Like, it shouldn't be that hard to find like a right fit student. But I also think that like what you could do with something like this, and why I think this is a great idea for especially a higher ed marketer that is responsible for more than just advancement or just admissions, right? Like, or just student success, is like a show like the how we're building this, or whatever the heck we want to call it, that can be used as a recruitment asset that can be used for current students to kind of tune in and find out and understand, oh wow, there's this project going on, like I didn't even realize. Depending on the size of your institution, there's a shit ton that happens. Most people don't even know. Like, it's hard to keep on top of everything that's happening. It could also be a tool for advancement, fundraising, saying, hey, listen to this show. Look at what we're doing. Yeah. You've got somebody that's now working, at a Fortune 500. They might want to come and like recruit that student that was featured on that show. Yeah. They might want to give a gift to this. I mean, like it's a show that like is expansive across the university enterprise, which would be cool. Yeah. And which could actually like getting like the funding and resources to produce something like this is maybe a little bit more tenable when you can pull from these various.
And that's what I think is the hard thing. I mean, just for so many things, but is like, okay, this team has to work with this team and this team, and then that has to happen. And I think that's maybe the harder part, is getting all these people aligned in something that this serves all of our needs, most of our needs, but not all of our needs. Yeah. And like, but you have to be okay with that, because it's costing you a third of the price to produce this thing, where I feel like everybody's kind of like, we want our thing. We also only have 3 people that can do it. This team wants their thing. They have one person that's going to half-ass it. And then it's like, oh great, now everybody's stuff sucks. Yeah. So like, why not just, make a couple sacrifices on all the talking points, and you're not going to get everything, but give us your top 3. We can weave these things in, and this can be valuable for all of us, save us all money, and we can, do more of these, and pound per pound, you'll get all your talking points across. It'll be across 3 things, not all in one. And I feel like that might be not a barrier. No, I do mean that, a barrier. Because I think that teams aren't used to doing that. And that is going to be hard. You're going to have to talk to people that you've probably had issues with in the past, or have had challenging conversations with. And now you need to convince them that this is a good idea, and you're trying to play like peacemaker at the same time, which I'm sure can be hard. But I do think that's probably the new wave, or takes a president that maybe is going to be like, hey, here's how we do shit. You don't get to ask questions.
It's either got to come from like a team that really craves to break down silos, or it's got to come from like the top down.
Or lead like a director of admission or a CMO that's just highly respected at the institution and has a track record of like, I'm trying to help you guys out. I'm not just trying to do marketing and nothing else, and I don't care what your admissions team's going through. Once you get people like that, and that have built relationships and established trust with a variety of teams, if they can be the ones that enforce it, could actually happen.
Yeah. Well, great. I feel like we've got middle of the road, university unfiltered, for lack of a better term, and then how we're building this. So
clearly this podcast was not about coming up with a good name.
It's not about the name as much as it's about like the ethos, Dan, the ethos of the show. Like what is the direction? Give it to the viewers and the smart people behind us to come up with a good name.
For $20,000, we'll name your podcast.
For $20,000, we'll drink 3 more beers and then. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in to the pilot episode of the Brewstorm. And we want to thank our incredible partner, Doubletake Promotional Marketing, for these sick koozies. Watch this. Pretty sick, huh?
The reason I've been struggling every time.
Like, at an angle.
Keep going.
They're an incredible resource if you've got swag that you need and promotional materials. Matt and his team there are just incredible. You can tell him that Enrollify sent you his way. Next time you need an epic piece of swag, whether it's the hat, a sweatshirt, a kick-ass, what are these called?
Non-tippable koozie.
Non-tippable koozie. Matt and his team are your people. Thanks, guys.
That was good. Honestly. And I'll do the porky to take the lap off, folks.
All right, we good?